Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're wading into what has to be one of the trickiest conservation dilemmas out there right now.
It really is.
It's this question of what happens when saving one species means you have to manage the impact of another species
Right.
that's also highly protected and, frankly, doing really well.
You've hit on the ultimate conservation catch-22. We're looking at a scenario where the prey, the species we're worried about, is the iconic capercaillie in Scotland.
Right, the ground nesting bird.
Exactly, and its population is in a critical decline. But the predators, we're talking mainly pine martens and badgers, they're thriving, they're protected by law, and they seem to be a huge factor in wiping out the nests each season.
So if our own protection laws are effectively pitting one protected species against another, what's the way out? I mean, we can't just fall back on the old methods, can we?
No, and that's where the science has to step in. Our mission for this deep dive is to unpack just a fantastic, rare, and incredibly robust 3-year field experiment.
Okay.
It was designed to test a non-lethal solution. So we're diving into the evidence behind something called diversionary feeding. The big question is, can you save the capercaillie population by, well, just offering their predators some alternative food?
And we're pulling this from a massive study in the Cairngorms National Park using some really sophisticated, non-invasive tech camera traps, basically, to get answers where you physically can't intervene. This isn't just a theory. It's about finding a solution backed by really high-certainty science. So let's set the stage properly. The key players. First, the capercaillie.
Catroeurogallis.
The largest grouse in the world. I've heard it called the horse of the woods. It's a Schedule 1 protected species here. So why is the situation in Scotland so desperate?
It really comes down to its biology and its habitat. They're ground-nesting birds,
Right.
which means their eggs, and later their chicks, are just right there on the menu for any predator wandering by. Plus, they're incredibly sensitive to disturbance, which is why that Schedule 1 protection is so strict about not bothering them during the breeding season.
So they're just not reproducing fast enough to keep up.
Not even close.
Yeah.
And their vulnerability is hitting at the exact same time their predators are making this huge comeback.
Okay, let's talk about the co-stars then. Or maybe the antagonists in this story.
Well, they're magnificent animals, a key part of the ecosystem.
Of course.
But yes, they are also very effective, opportunistic nest predators, especially during that very short capercaillie breeding window. We're talking about a whole guild of what are called generalist mesocarnivores in the cairngorms. But the main ones are the pine marten and the badger, both legally protected.
And that's the absolute crux of the issue, isn't it? Because they're protected. Traditional management, which usually means lethal control, is, for all intents and purposes, off the table.
It is, but beyond the legal and ethical problems, the source material is really clear that lethal control is often not that effective anyway.
Why is that?
It's a crucial point. Lethal control gives you a short-term dip in predator numbers, at best. You create a vacuum in the landscape, and two things happen almost immediately. First, compensatory immigration.
Meaning new ones just move in?
Instantly. New predators from the surrounding areas just flood in to take over the empty territory and the resources. It's a basic fact of population dynamics. You'd have to keep doing it constantly, forever, just to keep the numbers down.
So you're just fighting a continuous battle to hold the line. You're not even gaining ground.
Precisely. And the second thing is compensatory breeding. If you lower the population density, sometimes the survivors actually have higher survival rates or bigger litters. They bounce back faster.
So it becomes this high-cost, high-effort treadmill that doesn't even really work in the long run.
Exactly.
And look, society is moving away from the idea of constantly culling native wildlife. The moral hurdles are getting higher and higher.
Right. So if you can't control the predator population size, you have to shift your thinking to managing the impact of that population. And that brings us to the intervention. Diversionary feeding, or DF.
Diversionary feeding. It sounds elegant.
It is. It's a concept based entirely on predator ecology. You deliberately provide an alternative, really appealing food source. In this experiment, it was deer carrion at specific times and places.
To do what exactly?
The goal is to divert those opportunistic predators away from the thing you want to protect, in this case, the capercaillie nests. The predator basically sees this big, easy, high-value meal and thinks, why would I waste energy searching for tiny hidden eggs when this is right here?
And why deer carrion specifically?
It's a smart use of an existing resource. Deer management is essential for forest regeneration in the cairngorms. You have to control their numbers to stop overgrazing.
Okay.
So the resulting carrion is already there. It's a natural food for these predators, and it makes the experiment practical. It's tying two management objectives together.
It sounds simple in theory, but to prove that it actually works on a landscape scale, and I guess that it doesn't cause other problems, that must take immense scientific rigor. Let's dig into the experimental design. What made this study so certain in its conclusions?
The scale and the randomization, those are the keys. This wasn't a small one-off test. It ran for 3 full breeding seasons from 2021 to 2023. And it covered a huge area, 600 square kilometers of the Cairngorms Connect landscape.
Wow.
And importantly, they made sure there was no lethal fox control happening in that area during the study. Foxes are another big nest predator, so they could be sure any effect they saw was from their feeding, not something else.
And they used a randomized controlled design. So some areas got food, the treatment, and some didn't, the control. But they did something clever with them, right? They didn't just use the same 2 areas every year.
Correct. And this is what makes the methodology so robust.
Yeah.
They divided the landscape into these 1-kilometer square grid cells and then rotated the treatment.
What do you mean rotated?
Well, if a grid cell got the diversionary food in year 1, it became an unfed control area in year 2. They switched them every single year.
Ah, I see. So that removes any bias from the location itself.
Exactly. It means the effect they measured was purely from the feeding, not because one patch of forest was just inherently better for capercaillie than another. It's a sign of a really well-thought-out experiment.
Okay, let's get into the practical side. I imagine a lot of managers would worry, if you start feeding predators, won't they just become dependent? Or won't their population explode? Or won't they all just hang around the feeding stations causing other problems?
A huge concern, and the study was designed specifically to address that. They managed the feeding very, very carefully. It was only done as a short, seasonal 8-week pulse.
Just 8 weeks.
That's it. It started in late April to cover egg laying and incubation and ended in early July, which covers the first 30 days after the chicks hatch. That's the most vulnerable period.
That's a very deliberate window.
It's extremely deliberate. The short time frame was designed to get a behavioral response, to change what they were hunting for right now, while avoiding what's called a numerical response.
A numerical response being...
When the extra food actually causes the predator population to grow bigger or survive better over the long term, by keeping the food seasonal and temporary, they avoided subsidizing the predators and just making more of them.
So you're targeting their behavior, not their population. That makes a lot of sense. And the last piece of the puzzle. How did they measure success without disturbing these super sensitive, protected birds?
This was another clever part. Non-invasive monitoring. They used camera traps, but they placed them very strategically at dust baths.
Dust baths?
Yeah, capercaillie hens and their broods use these little patches of dry soil to clean their feathers. They visit them frequently. So by monitoring these specific spots, the cameras could spot the hens, and this is the crucial part, count how many chicks were with them.
Ah, so you can measure productivity without ever going near a nest.
Exactly. It's accurate and it's ethical.
Okay, let's get to the results then, the moment of truth. The paper talks about using a hurdle model. Can you break that down for us? Why a 2-part analysis?
Yeah, think of it like 2 gates you have to get through, one after the other. The capercaillie's problem isn't just one thing, it's a sequence. So the model asks 2 separate questions. The first hurdle, and it's the biggest one, is, did the hen manage to hatch a brood at all? That's nest survival. Success or failure.
Okay, hurdle 1. Did the nest survive?
Right. And only if she clears that hurdle do we move to the second question. If she did succeed, how big was her brood? How many chicks did she have?
Got it. So, step 1. Did we save the nest? What did the data show for nest survival? What was the failure rate in the areas that didn't get the extra food?
It was devastating. It shows you just how bad the situation was. In the unfed control areas, the probability of a hen being barren, so failing to produce any brood at all, was a staggering 0.848.
Wait, almost 85%? 85% of hens in the control group failed to produce a single chick. That number alone tells you everything you need to know about why the population is collapsing. That's just completely unsustainable.
It's catastrophic. But now, look at the effect of the diversionary feeding. In the areas that got the food, that probability of being barren plummeted to 0.37.
Wow. From 85 down to 37?
It means the probability of a hen succeeding just went through the roof. This intervention took something that had only really been shown in small artificial nest experiments and proved it works in the real, messy, complex wild. They saved the nests.
That is a massive result. But what about the second hurdle? Brood size. Did the diversionary feeding affect how many chicks a successful hen had?
And this is where the nuance comes in. Interestingly, no, it didn't.
Really?
DF had no influence on the expected brood size for the hens that did manage to hatch chicks. The data showed that, for successful mothers, the number of chicks declined significantly through the season in both the fed and the unfed areas.
So the chicks were still dying off after they hatched.
Yes, at about the same rate everywhere. The brood size dropped from an average of around 3.7 chicks right after hatching, down to about 1.9 chicks over the course of 98 days.
So if the intervention worked to save the nest, but the chicks are still dying afterwards, doesn't that mean DF only solved half the problem?
It's not so much a flaw as it is a really important finding that points to the next step for managers. It tells us that chick survival post-hatch mortality is being driven by something other than the pine martens and badgers that were distracted by the carrion.
And what did the researchers suggest those other factors might be?
They pointed to two main things. First, other predators that weren't being diverted. Think aerial predators like goshawks, which obviously weren't going to be interested in a deer carcass on the ground. And the cameras barely saw them at the fueling stations.
Okay, that makes sense.
And second, environmental factors. This is huge for young capercaillie. The chicks absolutely depend on insects for food when they're young. A cold, wet spring can just decimate the insect population.
So the chicks starve.
Right, they starve, regardless of whether a pine marten was around or not. So yes, DF solved the nest predation problem, but the habitat quality and chick food problem, that remains.
Now let's put it all together, because the real power of this is the combined metric, right? The overall productivity. So the number of chicks per hen, when you factor in both the nest success and the brood size, what was the bottom line?
This is where the difference becomes just staggering. It's the metric that decides if a population lives or dies. So remember that catastrophic baseline. In the unfed areas, overall productivity was just 0.82 chicks per hen.
Which, as you said, confirms the population is in a downward spiral.
Absolutely. But with diversionary feeding, that number shot up to 1.90 chicks per hen.
From 0.82 to 1.90.
It's a 131% increase in overall productivity. And it's directly attributable to this non-lethal intervention. Just think about the controversy and the effort it would take to try and get that kind of result using lethal control on protected species.
A 131% jump is just enormous. So let's make that really concrete for the listener. How does a productivity jump like that actually change the capercaillie's future? Did it move the needle from decline to growth?
Yes, unequivocally. This is where the population growth rate, what scientists call lambda, comes in. Without DF, the annual growth rate was calculated to be lambda equals 0.903.
And anything below 1.0 means the population is shrinking.
Correct. It confirmed what everyone was seeing on the ground in Scotland, a population in decline.
And with DF,
With diversionary feeding, the growth rate jumped to lambda equals 1.109.
over 1.0, the sweet spot.
That's the sweet spot. It means the population is now growing. This single intervention shifted the population's trajectory by 20%, moving the capercaillie from a predicted annual decline to a 10% annual increase.
That's the definition of a successful conservation intervention. It's like your investment portfolio was shrinking by nearly 10% a year, and one change switched it to growing by 10% a year. That completely changes the long-term outlook.
It gives them resilience, which is what they so desperately needed. And you have to put that 1.9 chicks per hen figure in context, too. Previous models had suggested that for the Scottish capercaillie to just stabilize, to stop declining, they needed to get to somewhere between 0.6 and 1.1 chicks per hen.
And 1.9 just blows past that stabilization target.
It leaves it in the dust. It suggests that if you apply this widely, you're not just holding the line, you're ensuring long-term recovery.
And the source material even pointed out that this productivity level, the 1.9, was higher than what's seen across the capercaillie's international range, even in places that are supposedly more stable.
It is. It's a powerful validation of the technique.
So this research gives what the authors called certainty of the evidence for managers, and that's critical because people on the ground need solid proof before they adopt a new, non-lethal strategy, especially one that involves feeding predators.
It validates it with rigorous randomized data. It shows DF works to mitigate the impact of nest predation from pine martens and badgers. The whole structure of the study, switching the sites, the large scale, it proves this is a reliable method you can replicate and scale up.
And it directly addresses that big fear we talked about, that you're just going to make the predator problem worse in the long run.
Exactly. The strict seasonal short-term protocol was clearly the right move. The study found no evidence that it caused predators to aggregate long-term or that it boosted their population.
Right.
And the message there for managers is, don't let the theoretical fear of those side effects stop you from looking at this method. The science shows that if you do it carefully, you avoid those pitfalls.
So this is really more than just a fix for capercaillie. It's a potential template for conservation conflicts all over the world, isn't it?
I think so. This conflict between a recovering generalist predator and a vulnerable ground-nesting prey species is a global headache. You see it with endangered wading birds, other types of grouse.
All facing similar pressures.
And this non-lethal, impact-based strategy offers a path forward. It's a way to support predator recovery while also stabilizing the prey. It's really a win-win for coexistence.
The evidence seems compelling. You can have both. You can have recovering predators and recovering prey if you just manage predator behavior at that one critical, vulnerable time of year.
It's about resource management, not population control. And we can have confidence in these results because the study's control numbers, that 0.848 failure rate, they lined up perfectly with historical monitoring data for capercaillie. So it even validated the non-invasive camera trap method itself.
So to wrap this up, I think the biggest takeaway here is understanding why this worked so well. Diversionary feeding didn't have to fix everything. It didn't make the chicks healthier. It didn't stop the goshawks. It didn't solve the problem of a cold, wet spring.
No, it didn't.
But just by increasing the probability of a successful nesting, that monumental 131% productivity gain, it was enough. It solved the most critical bottleneck and fundamentally shifted the capercaillie population from a path of decline to one of growth.
It bought them time, essential time.
Which brings us to a provocative thought for you, the listener, to think about. We've established that diversionary feeding solved the nest predation problem, but not the chick survival problem that comes later, which seems to be tied to habitat quality. So, what other non-lethal interventions would need to be researched and rolled out at the same time to give the capercaillie the best possible chance of a full recovery?
Well, given that the post-hatch loss seems linked to a lack of insects, the source material points pretty clearly towards habitat improvements. It means managers also need to focus on interventions that boost the blaeberry understory.
Because that's where the insects are.
That's where the insects live. It provides food and shelter for them. So we're talking about things like carefully managed burning or targeted grazing to encourage that kind of growth.
So diversionary feeding stabilizes the patient, but only the right kind of habitat management will make sure the new generations actually thrive. It's a perfect example of how real conservation needs a whole stack of solutions working together. There's rarely just one silver bullet.